Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michael Bullock, and this is part two of my painting in New Mexico mountain scene video. I thought this would be a two-parter, but it's going to stretch into a third. This video was originally filmed in April of 2021 for my World of Watercolor class at San Juan College, located in Farmington, New Mexico. It was shot at my studio in Artifacts Gallery via Zoom. Just like part one, I didn't have the best microphone, so I had to re-record some of the dialogue. You'll notice there are some spots where I sound a bit different. If you haven't watched part one yet, go back and watch that first. There'll be a link in the show notes below. If you're new to my channel, which I'm assuming most people are because I'm sort of new to YouTube, please take a moment and like the video and subscribe to the channel. It'll really help me out. And I want to keep bringing you great watercolor lessons and content. If you enjoy this video, consider sharing it with anyone you think might also enjoy it. I'm going to make a little plug for Utrecht Art Supplies. My affiliate link is in the description below. Clicking it will take you to my curated supply list. Be sure and check that out. Some of the items, like paint colors, are doubled up because I recommend two different brands. So they're available from both. Don't feel like you need to order everything. Just take a look and pick and choose things you think you might like. I also have a discount code from Mead Art, which is MBW70 for 12% off your purchase. The link for that is also below. Mead is a great site for budget-conscious artists, especially those wanting to try watercolor for the first time. They have some great deals on their brand of watercolor paints and brushes, and they feature some amazing studio furniture. So be sure and check them out as well. I really like their 140-pound watercolor paper as a great budget alternative to arches. Also, don't feel that you need to order a bunch of stuff to try watercolors. If you have supplies you like, then use them. The best supplies are the ones you already have. Now let's get started with part two of painting a New Mexico mountain scene.
So if you'll recall, what I was talking about was we have this kind of dark area down here that's somewhat shadow, but also we have some kind of shrubbery up here that has a little bit of light in it. So I don't want to go too dark too fast for these little bushy shapes that are kind of like these out here. And then we want to be able to kind of come in here and add a little more texture to these areas as well. And we won't have to, I don't know if you can see that at all, or if my hand was in the way. But these kind of lighter areas, we want to add some more kind of texture as well. I am going to use my number 8 round. What I'm going to do is start, I want to do a little bit of this foreground. So I'm going to start on this kind of bushy shape. And I don't know if you guys can see the pencil drawing through there. It may be a little bit closer than I wanted. I actually may want it a little bit bigger than what I have, but that's okay. That pencil line's just there as a suggestion. I think what I'm going to do is actually grab a little bit of permanent green number 1, and I'm going to mix that with a little of this. I had some lemon yellow here, and I also had some of that permanent yellow deep right next to it, and you can see it's kind of making a little bit lighter version of like sap green. So I'm going to use a little of that in this area where we're going to catch a little bit of light on bushy shapes. And I'm going to go ahead and bring it up a little further than I originally did. And I'm not too worried about these pencil lines showing. Eventually, this is fairly dark down here. And even if they're visible, people won't notice. Once I get over into here, I have these kind of fence things. So now I'm going to move to a little hooker's green and just start letting that kind of bleed in. Just this lighter, it's still, quite dark compared to that mix of lemon yellow, permanent yellow deep, permanent green into one. A fair amount darker than that, but it's a lot lighter, say this dark up here. And all I'm doing is just kind of, I can see that I'm going to completely clean my brush. I can see that my yellow green mix up here, it dried too much, so I just need to get it wet. That's kind of the start for that. These are just little bushy shapes. And then what I'm going to do is move into a little hooker's green blue mix, and that's where you could mix anything from hooker's green with royal blue, Prussian blue, Antwerp blue, indigo, whatever you want to use. Any of those will work to make a nice, fairly dark blue green. I'm going to just bring that down and let that And down here, I want to just sort of soften this. This is all mostly going to be in shadow, unless I decide to put a little bit of light in there, which I don't think I will because I'm still fairly close to the bottom here. I don't have a lot of real estate left for that little sliver of light. I don't think it's necessary. I'm going to have a fair amount up in here. I didn't like how harsh that was. And I can even come back in here and add just a hint, either, like permanent yellow deep or this azo yellow, Indian yellow. I could come in and add just a skosh of that. But then as I get there, you can see this line just soften this whole bit. Because this is, that's going to all be shadow. Could even come in, if I wanted to, grab a little peacock blue and just throw that in just to give it a little bit of a blue-green hint, kind of like sage or that's, it's not that much of it, not a lot of it there, just a little hint of that blue-green gray. Nice thing about this is where we start getting some of this gives that nice sagey gray look. So what I'm going to do is now switch to my number 6 brush because I'm going to be working up here. And I want to just add some more variety of color. And because I was dealing with a big wash. So it's mostly that kind of orangey, that yellow deep that's right in here. And so I want a little bit more variety in color. I was using a much bigger brush than this before. So this will help kind of pull in some of those other colors. So I think what I'm going to start with
is a little opera. So first I'm going to place some of this opera down, and then I'm going to grab a little bit of water and soften that just a bit. Then I'll just keep adding more across here as we go.
What I do is just completely clean my brush and then just move, kind of using the side of my brush. So if you imagine that this side of my finger is a paper, I'm pressing down like that. Put these little tick marks with water around this color. Go with a little sap green, which I'll show you on the palette. It's this kind of earthy green, but I'm going to kind of tone it down a little bit with a little lemon yellow. So I get kind of an earthier version of the permanent green. So it's a little earthier, but very similar in value. So I want to kind of pull some of that in. Put some in there. Clean my brush out and kind of do a very similar thing with that paint. I don't have to do a lot. Really, all I'm doing is just kind of making interesting little marks with the side brush. And I can choose where I want to pick that back up, kind of a thirsty brush. And then I can bring in a little permanent yellow-orange well with that. I know that sounds weird, having that earthy green and then the orange. See that you get this really interesting kind of contrast between the two. And really, all I'm doing is adding a little more texture and color variation in these areas. Go back to some of that pink, and that actually was permanent rose. It wasn't opera, but opera would work fine. Or if you have some other kind of light pink, adds that kind of the idea of those little seed heads that are on top of grasses and stuff, kind of have that look.
Maybe I'll come in with a little pyrrole orange here, just adding a little of that and some water at the same time, just to thin it down and make it more watery.
And I don't know that it's really visible what I'm doing, but it's really just adding texture and color variation.
Now I'm just adding a little permanent yellow orange, just for a slightly different orange. Pyrrole orange thins down to kind of a salmon peach, so we get even more color variation with this. So we're not going to get a lot of textural change here because I'm almost painting, well, I am painting wet and wet. because I've previously wet these areas with a lighter orange, we are going to get a lot of color variation, and that's just as important as the texture.
Let's come over here with some of this permanent or quinacridone rose. And again, I mean, all this is just different colors that work with this idea of grassy fields, and then the texture that goes with that as well.
Now I'm just dropping in a little bit more of that sap green, yellow lemon mix just to kind of even that out a little bit and blend that in a little bit more.
I'm going to start working over here a little bit, just adding a little of that light green, and maybe now come in with a little of the permanent yellow orange, kind of like we did over here. Pick some of those back up. But you can see I'm getting a really pretty good texture. Let's go in with use a little alizarin crimson, I think. That's this guy here. It looks like it's kind of a purple in the light, but it's really more of a deeper rose color. Here, real quick, I'm going to bring some of that in around. I know that that's opera right there that I was using. So I just want to add a little bit darker pink, reddish pink hue to that. I like that texture that happened there by accident, so that's kind of fun.
Now I'm just switching it up with a little permanent yellow orange, just again to get that variation in color. And I'm using a lot of water with this paint.
And then let's go back to that green, that sap green lemon yellow mix. I'm not too worried as I get down in here if I go over those lines, because this all will be fairly dark. So I'm just adding a little more texture.
Now I'm just going to start switching back and forth between that permanent yellow orange and alizarin crimson, just to, again, get that variation, get that texture. Still using a lot of water with this. Then I'll just switch over to maybe just a little bit more of this permanent yellow sap green mix, just to kind of even it out over up in here.
Add some more of that orange down in here. And if I kind of zoom in on this, you can see it doesn't really look like much of anything other than just texture. But as we come back out, we'll see that it starts to feel like a meadow.
I could even come in with a little of that purpley gray that's up in there, which is made up of quinacridone violet with a little bit of indigo or royal blue and a hint of hooker's green. And this will just add a little bit more mid-tone up in this area over here, give you some slight shadow on whatever, grass or whatever.
And it just adds more, like I said, texture.
And I like that purpley gray, but I want to brighten it up a little bit. And so now I'm dropping in just a bit of quinacridone violet. But if you don't have the quinacridone violet, you could also use alizarin crimson in here. That would be a really nice color as well.
I'm just going to add a little opera and a little permanent rose. Give that nice contrast with the green. This is feeling dry enough now where I feel like I can start adding a little bit of this shadow that I want to go on. So I'm going to switch back to my number 10 round and sort of start on that. And for this, I want to use, obviously I kind of want to use some dark greens and stuff, but I also want to break that dark green up with some other colors. So I want to use, some violets and maybe even a touch of, orange in there. So I'm going to start off with that, if you'll recall, that mix of hooker's green and indigo. I think in my case it was indigo, a little heavier on the indigo. But if you're using royal blue or Antwerp blue or Prussian blue, any of those. So I'm going to start with a little of that and just come over here, paint a little bit of this shadow in here. and then try and kind of bring it up a little bit into this bush. Before I go too far though, I want to switch to a little quinacridone violet blue mix, and I'm actually just going to pull a little bit of that color that I just mixed that or liquefied. I'm going to pull that over into.
And now I'm going to add in a little quinacridone magenta. Now, you could use alizarin crimson or something else like that instead if you don't have quinacridone magenta. This gives me a nice variation in not only color, but also in the darks. And now I'm just adding in a little peacock blue. Again, this is just a variation in color. I'm going to move a little over to the left as well. And just kind of, again, that variation in color and brightness. And now I'm thinking I probably need another color change, so I'm going to change up into that dark violet again and just add a little bit more back up in here.
Soften the top of this because I want to come back in and kind of.
Then I just want to soften up some of these edges up here and kind of blend these darks up into these bush shapes that I've. Now I'm just going to bring in some more of that Hooker's Green indigo mix that I created earlier, just to kind of get another dark that's slightly different from the others. Well, and there I just grabbed some dioxazine purple, which is not really what I meant to grab. I was really wanting to grab that quinacridone violet royal blue mix that I had created, but this dioxazine purple is pretty nice as well. I just had wanted that one that I mixed, so I was looking at it for some reason instead of the mix. But this can be like a good lesson that if something like that happens, don't panic. Just kind of go with the flow. And now I've created a slightly darker violet by adding some indigo to that violet mix. Then I'm grabbing that royal blue Hooker's Green indigo mix. Now I'm switching over to a little of that peacock blue again. And as I paint this, I'm just going to kind of paint these kind of wispy grass-like shapes with my brush. It's not going to be specifically grass, but just kind of grass-like shapes that I want to put in here. Now I'm thinking I'm going to finish it up maybe with some of that dioxazine violet. I really like how that looked, and it might be a little bright for the corner here, but that's not really a problem because we can darken it up later. Now, I really like what's happening here with this orange glow coming through, so I'm going to pick up a little permanent yellow orange just to try and add a little bit of that back in. So while this is still really wet, I'm going to add some of that orange and sort of let that bleed into everything. And then if I clean my brush out and just add some water, I can really get that to flow together. Some of this will look a little muddy, but that's okay. I can pick it back up. But I can just continue to add more orange to get that sort of glow. Here I'm just going to soften this edge. Maybe add a little bit more of the dark in. And now I can get that orange to flow down into that. So basically soften that up, added a little bit more dark paint, and then added the orange on top just to kind of blend in on its own on the paper, which is always a fun thing.
And what I can do, I can come back in and add these fence posts.
So in order to do that, I'm going to lift out a little bit of this area up here that's the top of that fence post just by taking some clean water in my brush and softening that paint that's already on the paper. I'm just going to, kind of use that to lift it out. I then take my brush and squeeze it out, and then I can lift that paint back up off of the paper. I'm not too concerned about lifting any of the stuff in the yellow. That's going to get painted over with some darker paint mostly.
What I'm going to do is now come in with a little permanent yellow deep just to add a little bit of a glow to this side. I want it to have a twinge of that color, that green.
I'm going to keep working in this yellow, permanent yellow deep. I might pick a little bit up here and work it on down. And then I'm going to apply a little bit over here on this second post that I have in my composition here. And then we'll deal with the darks and stuff later, but I want to get this kind of glow put in first. And then we'll let it dry before we work that anymore. I am going to try and kind of pull some of this orange up
as I go along here before I do anything else while this is still wet. Now that this is dry, I can come back in
with those darks, and I think I want to use similar darks to what I've got going on down here, which I may want to make darker eventually. I'm going to come in with indigo, and let's pull in a little quinacridone violet. And then let's add a little indigo to this green mix that I've got going on over here, which is not quite as dark. And then we'll probably do a thing where we've got kind of both of these mixed together to get an even darker kind of gray. But it'll be a nice vibrant. I'm going to just kind of come in with this here and cover up a lot of what's going on there. You notice, I mean, I didn't put a lot of effort into painting behind there, but and all I'm doing is kind of painting this dark edge of this post. So kind of midway through, I had the violet, and then I picked up a little of the green, and then a little more of the violet back into the green. And then here in a minute, when this dries a little bit, I'll come over and soften that edge. But I want it to be a little bit dry so I get a bit of sharper, a hint of a sharper line. This one, I'm going to kind of come in here. I know that I've got this guy coming in here. So really want this to be. Didn't pull that down long enough, but what I can do is that down there. I can pull a little more off, lift a little more out of there if I want it later. I'm going to pick up a little of the green. This one's going to have a little bit of a lighter side on the top. So all I'm going to do is paint it in later. And I've got this weird, it's kind of a broken down fence here anyway. So I'm not worried about the light side. Putting a little of the violet down here on the bottom of this fence post. Or I should say the side, but that is what's holding that up. And then I'll come in stop it right there. Pull it around to the other side. And right now, this doesn't look much like anything. Well, I mean, it mimics a falling down fence, but doesn't really. It's not really. It doesn't look quite realistic yet, but it'll get there. As that dries, I can come in here and soften this a little bit, just to give it that kind of round fence post. Lift a little. Gotten a little too much water up there, but as that dries, I can kind of light wash over that yellow, and that'll give me that lighter side that's still in the shadow. As we get down into here, we're going to want to take that even darker than what I've got it so far. So that was that kind of purple mix. Now I just have indigo. I think I'm going to bring just a little bit of indigo over here. That's still wet. See how that bleeds around. So I know on camera this all looks black. That's a little violet, a little indigo. So I'm going to put a little bit of a hint of a shadow bottom side of this. These kind of cross pieces. Not that you might see that much of it, but soften this. Pull some of that over that yellow that so it's not quite as bright. Little violet. It looks like all I used was that blue-green mix instead of some of the violet. I know I used some of the violet up here, but I think it needs a little bit more. I need to come over here and kind of add into the light. And it may look like I'm doing more than I need to, but I want to lift some of this back out and put a little bit of dark back into it. Light right in there. Then we'll come back in maybe with that violet mix. So it's just a little bit different than this board here. Sort of bring that around and curve, slight curve, and I want the rest of this fairly dark. And then as we get down into, go to a little blue-green, as we get down into here, this is another level of shadow that's up closer to where we are in the foot, where the viewer is. Even more so. And really all this is just, kind of thinking about the shapes that I want and then kind of creating those shapes. Didn't lighten quite as much as I wanted it to, but I was trying to be careful of that. What I want to do, this is looking a little weird here, so I just want to come back in. So I lifted a little out of there, and it's a little fuzzy because I smeared a little wet on other paint, but that's okay. I'm going to just add a little hint of this yellow to this kind of edge here. Lift right here. And instead of using a washcloth, what I need to do is just kind of use the edge of my brush and then come back in with a little of that highlight. A little more highlight up in here. And I know I'm painting this yellow over something that's already there, but it'll add just a hint of that glow to it. It's just kind of a greeny yellow, but that gives me enough light catching on that post. It starts to feel like it's really coming all the way down and sort of sinking in. So I want to come in and add, so I have this kind of shadow here, but I want to kind of come in and add some really darks into these bushy things here. So again, I'm going to use a little indigo, royal blue, and I may pick up a little green. I'm creating a kind of a puddle over here on top of that green. So it may have a little bit of green and a little bit of violet in it on top. So it's mostly that indigo. And I'm just going to kind of come in here and start making this look like some darker things inside this. some nice rich darks. And maybe I will mix in just a hint of violet over in here, maybe just for a variation in color. Gives that a little volume now by adding that. Blue here, pull that in over here. I've got some violet right there. I want to pull this way. And really, that's all I'm doing here is just kind of creating some darker darks within these kind of shrubby shapes. And I want to add a few up in there as well. And then I want to make this a bit darker here. And I really should switch to a large. I was using my number 6. I'm just going to grab some indigo here and a little Hooker's green for this part right here. And cross like that. And then a little violet indigo here just to darken that up a bit. So you can see I still have that kind of nice color kind of glowing through there. But I've kind of darkened that quite a bit. So it's a little more on par with these darks that are going on up here. I want to bring a little more green into this up in here. So I'm going to grab a little permanent green number 1 and maybe a little lemon yellow. That's a little dark. Change the shape. I'm not real crazy about that shape that I've got going on there. It may be that I also don't worry about it too much, but I just want to add a little bit of that. Felt like it needed a little more green, a little less of that gold that I put on there. You know, it was a permanent yellow deep, and it was kind of a gold, and it just felt like it needed to be a little more on the light green side versus what I had. I do want to bring in a little of that indigo Hooker's green mix and a little bit of that, but I just want a few little specks of really see what I'm talking about. It's adding just a hint more dark. And really, I'm just making little tick marks. I'm barely putting any pressure on the tip of my brush. So I'm just barely pushing down to get these little tick marks here. I don't want to cover up all those kind of medium darks that I have going on there. And then maybe clean my brush and get a little bit lighter clean, kind of pull some of this shadow across. See what I'm doing. So I added that kind of bit on this dark up in here. Pulling in a little of these darker shadows. What I may do is just kind of add a little more texture. Saying I made that line going across. I don't want to break it up. It's just like a straight line. I want to break that shape up. Kind of light green back in here to help blend that in. So what I'm doing is kind of coming in with that light. So I mix this kind of permanent green number 1 and lemon yellow, and I'm just adding a little bit more of that in here just to help soften some of that down at the bottom. If it doesn't soften, it's okay, but it's kind of adding another layer of color to help sell this idea that this is grass.
I'm now going to turn this around so I have it upside down so we can start working on the sky. When painting the sky, you're going to want a bit of an angle. I have an 1.5 inch drop from the back of my board to the front of my board.
So I'm going to just get this wet down this whole part of the paper. And if you get a little water over your like mountains or whatever, and they start to bleed into your sky, that's okay. It's not going to hurt anything, and it'll actually add a little bit of atmospheric perspective to it. So it'll help push them back. I'm always kind of happy when I out. Oops, see, kind of there I went overboard. All right, it is what it is. But don't panic if something like that happens. You can always come back and clean it up a little bit, sharpen up that edge with some more of that dark green mix. All right, so I've got a nice wet surface on my paper, and I can start thinking about what I want the sky to look like. Now, in the photo that we're using, it's somewhat overcast. Well, it's actually pretty overcast, and what's going on is that the clouds are up here and the sun has dipped down and it's coming in really low. Not only evening glow, but in this case, kind of evening with a contrasting kind of dark. So you have this kind of light coming in, and then you have this real dark sky. But we want to start light in our sky, so I'm going to start with a little peacock blue. That is a nice sky blue. I'm just going to start putting some paint, letting it run. You can see it's running, down towards what is really the top of the paper, but bring that in. This is where the toilet paper comes in handy, or Kleenex. Paper towel sometimes has a pattern in it that will sometimes get transferred to your paper. So I generally don't use paper towel for this. I think I have enough. And now I want to take my toilet paper roll and I want to get off a good healthy bunch and make myself patented cloud making tool. And you can see, again, I don't want to bunch it up so it's a little dot that I'm pressing against the paper. I want to use this whole kind of elongated shape. So let's see. I'm going to come in maybe here. As we get over here, maybe it's a little lighter. And let's see. Cloud shape there. And I'm kind of rotating the Kleenex around. So you can see I've used some in here and then I kind of folded it around. So I have mostly clean area of, did I call that Kleenex? This is kind of getting a clean section each time. So I'm not pressing paint into the paper because you can kind of bruise your paper. I like that little bit of dark there. I want to kind of save that. But let's come in. I'm still working in peacock blue right now. Cloud shape up here. It's going to get much darker here in a little bit. But right now I'm coming in with a little more that. Soften that edge right here close to the part, side of the paper, the edge of the paper. I don't want any sharp lines coming off the. In fact, I'm going to switch from my flat now. I'm going to switch back to, I'm going to use my number 8 round. It's just a little bit easier to get in some of these points and change these shapes up a little bit, make them feel a little more cloud-like instead of whatever that little triangle-y thing is going on. I had more paint in my brush on that one side than I realized. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a little, because this is going to be stormy, I'm going to bring in a little of that violet indigo mix that I have, and maybe even a little royal blue over here. just so that gets starts getting kind of dark over in this corner. And then come back in with a little blue over here and kind of see what we can break this shape up. Wasn't super happy with what I did over here, but that's okay. It's all changeable. 8 gallons of water pouring down on my shirt. So that in, and then see if I can't. This has got a nice sharp line here, but I don't really want that nice sharp line. So I'm going to just get a clean piece of toilet paper and see if I can't soften that up a bit. Got blue again. And you may be thinking, well, gee, you're just putting those lines back in. And yes, I am to some extent. But my plan is, before it dries, to come in and kind of make that blend in and fuzz out a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit of a directional thing going on there. And we'll see what happens. Plus, I want to soften this. I'm not real crazy about it either. So, I mean, just by softening that, I can come in with a little royal blue back in here, I think, just to darken that. And even some of that indigo violet mix. Not too much yet. I don't want to get too carried away while I'm doing this part. And I want a little hint of that. Over here, I'm just using what's left in my brush, painting over that real wet area. And I'll come in and kind of lift some of this edge up so that it's not, I had a weird shape there that I didn't care for. So let me turn this around. And right now, I could stop here, and it's a fairly sunny, cloudy day, but that's not what I want. I like what I've got, and it's cool. But I really want to give that impression of a stormy sky that's really dark and heavy coming down,
and then has the light coming in down underneath it. I hope you enjoyed painting along with me as much as I enjoyed creating this painting. If you made it this far and are enjoying what I'm doing, please consider subscribing to my channel and clicking the little bell to get notified of my next video. It's completely free and it really helps me out. Also, consider clicking the like button and sharing the video with anyone you think would also enjoy it. Leave a comment and let me know if you're enjoying my videos. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave it below. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you look forward to finishing the painting with me next week. So with that, I'll say goodbye. I'll see you all in the next video. And remember, life's too short to paint on cheap paper.